Hello, this is Jackie Moore, and I'll be recording Chapter 5, Consumer Behavior. Consumer behavior essentially is the study of how consumers make decisions about what they want to buy, what brand to purchase, where they go to purchase, what influences them when they make that purchase, and then how they actually use and then dispose of the goods after they've been used. There are a lot of interesting books on this topic, and consumer behavior is one of the most important topics in marketing, and it's heavily grounded in psychology and social psychology. The fact is that the way consumers go through the purchase process varies quite a bit depending on how involved or how meaningful that purchase is for that specific consumer. And essentially the amount of effort varies on a continuum from very thorough, exhaustive effort for extended problem solving through very simplified, immediate purchasing that's called habitual decision making, such as when you go to the grocery store and you buy the same brand of milk repetitively. Essentially, there are 5 steps that all consumers go through in the decision-making process. And again, each of these steps would be more thorough for extended problem solving, and some of them would be short-circuited or circumscribed for routine response behavior or habitual decision-making. Those are 2 names for the same thing. And essentially this process is affected by the consumer's level of involvement, which is a very important consumer behavior construct that essentially means how important that purchase is to the consumer in terms of both their perceived consequences of the purchase and the perceived risk in buying the product. If you're going to be buying a new car that you're going to spend a lot of money on and it's going to last for many years, if you get a lemon or a car that doesn't meet your needs, obviously that has more risk than going to the store and buying a loaf of bread that you decide has too many seeds for you or was dry. So what you see is that the level of involvement, the first row here, essentially is correlated with extended problem solving for high involvement purchases compared to habitual or routine response behavior for low involvement decisions. And this chart does a very nice job of walking you through how involvement, risk, consumer information processing, and learning changes along this continuum of involvement. What's nice about this slide is that it actually shows the marketing implications that arise from these concepts. And as we go through Chapter 5, I want you not only to know what the consumer behavior concept is, but why it's important. And the why it's important essentially translates that concept into implications for marketing strategy. And this first slide gives a sample of how marketing strategies must differ for high involvement versus low involvement products. What we'll do is we'll be going through each of these steps in class and talking about how the consumer comes to do or accomplish the step, and then what the marketing implications are. So I'm going to ask you to do these 5 steps on your own in terms of reading the book and then taking notes in class. Step 1. Step 2 deals with how consumers get information to support their decision process. For high involvement products like cars, consumers tend to spend a lot more time and energy on getting a lot of information. For example, they may ask friends or opinion leaders who know a lot about cars about their recommendation. Or if you're going to buy a mountain bike or a snowboard, you might take a friend with you to help you understand some of the technical features of those products. You may also decide to look at consumer reports or online reviews. And marketers, of course, would like to influence your behavior, and so certainly they place a lot of ads in both traditional media and non-traditional media. And for high involvement purchases, retail salespeople can be critically important, not only in terms of training those salespeople to understand the features of a specific brand, but also in terms of the placement and shelf space at the retail store. With today's online information, most consumers are what are called multi-channel shoppers, that they get a lot of information online. Sometimes they access that information at the store during the purchase process. And this integration of both online shopping and brick and mortar shopping is sometimes called multi-channel shopping or harmonization of distribution channels. I'd like you to look carefully at this slide on information search and understand each of these 6 bullets about the types of information that are used. This chart provides a summary of Step 1 and Step 2, and essentially it shows the marketing implications of these 2 steps. One of the most important tools that marketers have today in the online environment is called behavioral targeting. And what you'll see, my definition of behavioral targeting at the bottom here essentially is super smart, super targeted display ads online that are targeted based on a person's past online behavior. Super smart means that this is the use of big data. The data are used in algorithms to determine what ad to place. And cookies on your computer and weblog files essentially are used to help marketers do a better job of placing ads that are more likely to draw your attention. I have heard informally that one of the best ways you can shop online for airlines is to get rid of all your cookies, because you might get better prices by marketers not knowing what your most commonly traveled routes might be. I'm not going to go over this example on the podcast. If we have time in class, I will go through Yahoo's approach to behavioral targeting. The fact is that privacy issues loom very large for marketing, and now that we've seen that the National Security Administration is using our cell phone records, the fact is that this concern over consumer privacy is not going to go away anytime soon, and it's really important for business leaders to think through carefully about how to phrase privacy policies and how to use data. The next 3 steps in the consumer decision-making process are summarized here, and at this point we'll go through each of the steps in turn. Step 3 is called evaluation of alternatives. I have 2 things asterisked on this slide. The asterisks on this slide mean that these terms are not used in your book, but they are commonly used terms by marketing professionals. For most decisions, consumers narrow down the number of products that they'll consider to a handful of products, say 3 to 5, and this is called the evoked set. It's very important at step 3 that a company's product be in a consumer's evoked set. So how does a company like Frigidaire make sure that if you're going to go out and buy an air conditioner, that Frigidaire is one that you want to look for? Well, certainly it needs to have good reviews and consumer reports. It needs to have some level of advertising in the media where its target market is looking. And it's through the information search process that marketers have a higher chance of getting in the consumer's evoked set. Consumers then use decision criteria or attributes to evaluate those alternatives. So sticking with the car example, The most common attributes to evaluate cars would be things like fuel efficiency, price of the car, length of the warranty, safety, handling. And the attributes do vary by target market. The attributes that a college student would consider are very different than the attributes that a family might consider in deciding to buy a family car. And a tool that marketers use to help them understand the customer's thought process in step 3 is called a multi-attribute model, which I will cover in class. The fourth step is after the consumer carefully evaluates the alternatives, particularly for a high involvement process, they then decide what product to buy. For low involvement goods, consumers may rely on heuristics, which are rules of thumb to help make a simplified decision. Some heuristics that are quite common include buy a higher price because price means quality. Always buy a particular brand, Apple, because their products are always good for me. Country of origin essentially is always buy American because I want to support American manufacturing. Or made in Montana would be state of origin. And many consumers have loyalty heuristics based on where the product was made. Finally, students frequently use an always buy low price heuristic because they're on a budget. And this can be used frequently by store brands who always undercut the national brands on price. At this step, marketers can take several steps to influence consumer behavior. Let's say in step 3 that a consumer had decided they really wanted to buy a Toyota, but when they went to the Chevy dealer, they found that there was a really nice rebate or 0% financing for 5 years. Sales promotions in financial terms can definitely skew a consumer's purchase at this point, particularly for low involvement goods. At the point of purchase at the store, if you find a deal for buy 3, get the 4th free, that can have a strong influence. And so product choice sometimes is not perfectly correlated with alternative evaluation. The fifth and final step in the consumer decision-making process is their post-purchase evaluation, which is critically important because marketers want satisfied customers. Customer satisfaction is a function of how well the product met the consumer's expectations. One of the worst things marketers can do is to set unrealistic expectations, either in terms of ease of use or product quality, because then consumers will be dissatisfied. Marketing communications must create accurate expectations. Cognitive dissonance is the psychological term for buyer's remorse or post-purchase regret. This is very common for high involvement goods where even after a customer purchases a very expensive good, they may still look carefully at ads and at products just to assure themselves that they've made a good choice. And marketers can actually do quite a bit to help alleviate the likelihood of high post-purchase regret by following up with customers. A car salesperson might call a month later and say, "Do you understand the features?" A mountain bike may be taken into the retailer where it was purchased in order to get fitting or adjustments to be made. So the follow-up can be quite important. And this is where the long-term relationship marketing cycle starts, where marketers want to track how you're using the product and how satisfied you are so that they can optimize the likelihood of getting that next purchase in that product category for lifetime value. This ends the first podcast for Chapter 5.